Hey everybody, it's Peter Diamandis, and it's a pleasure to have you here for your first training video. Now, video number 1 is titled 6 Major Insights of Exponential and Abundance Thinkers. Now, we're going to be sharing and talking today about how to think about the future, how to think in an exponential fashion and in an abundance mind frame. Now, this has changed every aspect of my life. Every day, when I serve as chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation and executive chairman and co-founder of Singularity University, I work with some of the most brilliant people on the planet, and I've stopped to notice how they think. How do they attack their challenges? I'm going to share with you how they think. And how you think changes everything. Now, as chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, we are working on solving humanity's grand challenges, focused on exploring space, the deep oceans, energy and the environment, life sciences, education, global development. We have a rock star board that is literally focusing on what are the biggest problems? How do we slay them? At Singularity University, we've got extraordinary partners like Google and Autodesk and Genentech and Cisco and Nokia. And we're solving literally how can you positively impact the lives of 1 billion people? So today, I want to share with you the dream. The dream that I have learned from working with these extraordinary people. And the dream basically is 3 parts. Number 1, you can in fact live with a lot less fear in your life. I know if you're like me, you're constantly barraged by negative news. And how does that negative news make you feel? You can't be positive about the future when you're constantly being literally attacked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I'm going to show you how you can, with confidence, literally live with far less fear. Because if you live with confidence about the future, knowing that the world is going to be a much better place, the decisions you make are going to be extraordinary. If you're living with fear, you're cowering in the corner. If you're living with confidence about the future, you're making investments, you're making plans. So that's extraordinarily important. Number 1 of the dream, live with far less fear. Number 2 is that we don't have a world of scarcity. No matter what people are telling you, the world is becoming far more abundant every single day. And I'm going to show you where infinite resources are coming from, how to think with an abundance mindset. How would you like to be able to know that your life is getting better? That in fact the resources you need access to are becoming cheaper and easier to get. To realize that you are literally living a life that a king and queen 100 years ago or a US president could have never dreamed of. The third area we're going to talk about is how to make your dreams come true. How you can tap into brilliant people around the planet who are literally desiring to solve big problems. Now, it turns out that there are a lot of people out there with extra time on their hands. And every one of them, these global geniuses, have something that they're an expert in. And this interconnected world that we're creating is going to allow them to help you solve problems and help you make your dreams come true. You say, hey, Peter, really? Are there people out there that are going to help me? Have you ever heard of Wikipedia? Just think about the fact that this is the world's most extraordinary encyclopedia online that put the Encyclopedia Britannica out of business. It was so big, so bold, so amazing. And it was literally built for free. People had extra time on their hands who created this. Now, this idea of crowdsourcing, of tapping into global genius, is what I'm going to show you in this training series. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to be working on, tapping into this powerful capability. Now, I want you to know I'm a scientist and an engineer. So if some of this sounds kind of like wacky and wishful thinking and new age thinking, that's not what this is about. Let me tell you about myself, give you some of my background, what led me here. I was born in New York. Both my parents were born on a small island in Greece, the island of Lesbos. My dad tending, goats and having nothing to eat growing up. He was the first person to leave his island to go to Athens to go get a medical degree. My mom came over to the U.S. When she was 10, went back to Greece, met my dad, brought him over, not speaking a word of English. And I grew up in a family in which, hard work and learning was the baseline. And I'm so thankful that they instilled in me that desire to dream and the desire and the need to work hard. And when I was 9 years old, I remember it very, very clearly, I became just enamored with the Apollo program. It was at the end of the Apollo program. Star Trek was going on. I became literally passionate about wanting to open up spaceflight. I drank all the Tang there was. I don't know if you remember that orange powder drink, because I wanted to be an astronaut. And I remember telling my mom one day I wanted to be an astronaut. She said, "That's nice, son, but you're going to be a doctor." And so I ended up splitting my life and pursuing two different areas. One, to make my parents happy, to become a doctor. And I went to MIT and I studied molecular genetics and studied physics and aerospace engineering, and ultimately went to medical school to get a degree, because when I realized, in my heart of hearts, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I looked at the numbers. Up until that point, there had been some 400 astronauts who had ever flown into space. My chances of becoming an astronaut were minuscule. There were thousands of applicants. I mean, I calculated I had a better chance of becoming an NBA All-Star at 5'5" than I did becoming an astronaut. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to get whatever kind of six-pack of degrees I could get. And I went to medical school. I barely graduated. Harvard is great because it's hard to get in, but it's also hard to fail out. I remember at one point, my last year of medical school, I was running a number of companies. I was running something called the International Space University. My first university that I started, I was running a rocket company called International Microspace. And I would be literally in surgery in my fourth year of medical school, and I'd run out of surgery. I had one of those giant Motorola brick phones, and I'd call in to find out how the rocket engine firings were going on. Now, I'm definitely not the kind of doctor you would have wanted being in surgery. And I was just, I was a medical student. Just to be very clear, I was observing surgery. I didn't have my hands inside anybody. But my dream, my heart, my soul was wanting to become, a space explorer, an entrepreneur in space. It wasn't wanting to be a doctor. And I remember one day, Dean Tosteson, the dean of the medical school, called me up and brought me in. He says, "Peter, your interns and residents are telling me you're not paying a lot of attention in class and you're on your cell phone all the time. Can you tell me what's going on?" And I thought he thought something was illegal was going on. So I fessed up. I said, "Well, I'm running these two companies at night and when I'm not in school." And so he made me a proposition. He said, "Peter, do you want to graduate?" I said, "Yes, I want to graduate." He said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll let you graduate if you promise not to practice medicine." And I can tell you to this point, he held up his end of the bargain and I held up mine. But so my dream of spaceflight literally was going on there. And I started a number of companies. One of my companies I started is a company called Zero Gravity Corporation. You may have read about this. We have 727s. We fly parabolic flight. We give people the experience of weightlessness. And back in 2007, I was very honored to give Stephen Hawking, the most brilliant physicist on the planet, the world's expert in gravity, the experience of zero gravity. And then we've flown 12,000 people into zero G. Perhaps you're one of them. And we now train NASA's astronauts. So I did zero G, went on to create a number of other companies. But ultimately, one of the organizations that I started, the X Prize Foundation, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in one of the next training videos, I ran a global competition. My dream was fearful that I wouldn't get a chance to fly into space. I thought that space flight was just for a very few number of people, that it was finite, and that ultimately, I would never have my dreams come true. And, that's such a painful place to be, to have this passion and to say, I'll never get there. And so the X Prize, this whole idea of incentive competitions that I learned with my heart and soul are some of the techniques I'm going to share with you. But long story short, I ended up creating a global competition that challenged teams around the world to build a private spaceship. Get this, really, a private spaceship that could take you and me and a pilot up 100 kilometers into space, land safely, and within 2 weeks do it again. Now, it took me forever to raise $10 million, and I learned a lot of lessons I'd love to share with you on how to do that. But when that competition got launched, we had 26 teams around the world who spent $100 million to try and win this $10 million prize. 10 to 1. How is that? Best part about it, we only paid the winner. And the back end of that, Richard Branson came in and bought the rights for the winning technology and created Virgin Galactic. And now all of us can go and buy a ticket to space if you want. Literally, my fear of not being able to go vaporized. And rather than having a limited number of astronaut seats, we now have an infinite number of astronaut seats. Now, that's a big, crazy $10 million, $100 million play. These same techniques work on a, literally everyday level. We're going to be sharing this kind of thinking with you. So let's get started. Let's get started on the 6 key ways that thinkers that are leading our world think about exponential and abundance thinking. Number 1, why are we predisposed to think incorrectly? Now, you may be thinking, I don't think incorrectly. But in fact, each of us as humans do actually think incorrectly in today's world. Now, turns out that we evolved as humans on the plains of Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. And the hardware and software of our brains, the way that our brains are wired, are evolved for the way the world was back then. You see, on the plains of Africa 150,000 years ago, the world was local and linear. What I mean by that was that whatever would affect you was within a day's walk. If something happened on the other side of the planet, we'd know nothing about it. Your world was so local, and it was linear in that the life of your great-grandparents, your parents, you, your kids, their kids, nothing changed generation to generation. The world was pretty much flat. And so the way that we think today reflects the way our brains evolved. So we are local and linear thinkers, and we have these cognitive biases. It's a tough word, but it's the way that psychologists think about the limitations of the way we think. So we're local and linear thinkers by default. But today, the world is anything but local and linear. Today, the world is global and exponential, right? Something happens in China or India, you know about it seconds later. Your computers know about it microseconds later. And not linear by any means. Not only do things change century to century and decade to decade, they change year to year. I mean, just think for a second of the technology that our lives are dependent on today that didn't even exist 2 or 5 years ago. We'll talk more about that a little bit. But literally, if I asked you to take 30 linear steps, just where are you going to be in 30 steps, 30 paces? All of us, could pretty much guess, I'm going to go out my front door and 30 paces, I'm across the street. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, linear progression. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I were to ask you, where are you going to be in 30 exponential steps? And an exponential is a simple doubling. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. But if I were to ask you, where are you going to be in 30 exponential steps? That's not the way our brains are wired. Even though the world is changing exponentially. You might guess, hey, if I'm in my office in Santa Monica and I head east 30 exponential steps, maybe I'll be in the Mississippi, maybe I'll be in New York. But very few people would say, I'm going to be 1 billion meters away, which means I will have gone around the planet 26 times. Now, that disconnect between being able to, think linearly, project linearly, we're all great linear thinkers, in a world that's growing exponentially, is a wrong way to be thinking right now. And it's going to cause you to make poor decisions as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, as a mom and a dad. And what I want to share with you is how to be an exponential thinker. So the second question of 6 we're going to talk about right now is, why does it feel like the world is getting faster and faster? Now, I know my mom used to say to me, Peter, the world feels like it's getting faster and faster. And I felt this too, and maybe you have as well. And the fact of the matter is that the world is getting faster and faster. The technology in our world, the pace of our world is getting faster and faster. And I want to share with you why that's the case. Why is that happening? So this is a chart that comes out of my business partner's book, Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. And it's a chart that shows us the rate of computing speed across the last 110 years. So look at this. 1900 here, 2010 over here. Now we're on a log scale. I'm not going to go into the meaning of a log scale, but what I want to show you is that every one of these dots is a computer. Now we used to have electromechanical computers, really turn the cranks, then relays, vacuum tubes, transistors, and now integrated circuits. But look at this. The rate at which computers has been getting faster is pretty darn consistent. You don't see World War I or World War II or the Great Plague or recession or depression or anything. It's the result of faster computers being used to drive faster computers and build faster computers. And if you project this going forward, which we can, here's what happens. You see, the computer driving this presentation is calculating at about 100 billion calculations per second. That's a lot of calculations in a second. But 10 years, 10 years or so from now, the average computer that you can go and buy for $1,000 is going to be calculating literally as fast as the human brain, 10 to the 16 cycles per second. That's how fast your brain and my brain sees and understands, hears and listens and understands things. So imagine, if you would, when the average $1,000 computer that you can go down to Best Buy and buy is calculating at the rate of the human mind. That is going to be extraordinary. But it doesn't stop there, does it? Because 25 years later, the average $1,000 computer is calculating at the rate of the entire human race. This is what's driving our world to get faster and faster, because on the back of this computational power, what some people refer to as Moore's Law, the founder of Intel that builds the chips that's in our computers and calculators, this is driving all the technology in our world. And we're going to be talking about this technology that's going to transform every aspect of your life. So, some of you may have been in companies that are no longer around. Some of you may be in companies that were just started a year ago. The rate at which billion-dollar companies are going out of business and the rate at which billion-dollar companies are materializing out of no place is increasing. So my question number 3 in the exponential thinking world is, why is business more volatile than ever before? And it is more volatile than ever before. And I want to give you an example to help you understand this. It's an example that hits home for me. You see, we talked about this before, that this red line here, this red line is people. It's us. It's our politicians. It's our employees. It's our, everybody. It's our neighbors. We are all linear thinkers. This yellow line is exponentially growing technologies. It's computers that are doubling in power. It's synthetic genomics. It's 3D manufacturing. It's artificial intelligence and robotics. Powerful technologies that are changing every aspect of our world. It's Google. It's Facebook. All of these driven on computer platforms. And literally, the difference between the way that we think and the way that technology is growing is disrupting business. It's either a disruptive stress if you're being disrupted, or a disrupted opportunity if you know where to look. If you know what businesses are coming online, and if you know where to make your investments and position yourself for this exponentially growing world. So here's the example I wanted to show you. I'm going to start with Kodak. The year is 1996. Kodak is a roughly 100-year-old company. I mean, a mainstay company of America, a cornerstone of the Dow, right? This is a company that's got $28 billion in revenue, 140,000 employees, an extraordinary corporation. In 2012, this company went bankrupt. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. How do you go from being a $28 billion company to being bankrupt in literally, a decade or so? Well, what you don't realize is that Kodak invented the digital camera that put them out of business. Kodak invented the digital camera, but they didn't realize the power of exponential growth. They said, we're Kodak. We only make beautiful imagery. We focus on chemical business. We have beautiful film, high resolution, beautiful images. These digital cameras, they're toys. They're toys for kids. They don't make good images. And in the beginning, they did not. They really were low resolution digital images. But what Kodak did not understand was the power of exponential growth, that the resolution would double year after year after year after year. And ultimately, even though Kodak invented the digital camera, it put them out of business because they were not thinking in exponential terms. Now, to put an exclamation point at the end of the sentence, at the end of the story, in the same year that Kodak went bankrupt, Instagram, another digital imagery business, is acquired by Facebook for $1 billion with 13 employees. You see, Kodak was a linear thinking company, and Instagram, an exponential one. And if you're in a linear thinking company, let me tell you, there's danger there. And you have to literally transform yourself into an exponential thinking company and an exponential thinking executive or employee. 4 of 6. Now we're going to get into the abundance thinking questions. Why are we predisposed to think the world is getting worse? Now, when you write a book like Abundance, the future is better than you think, and you're telling people the world is getting better, once in a while people give me this reaction and saying, "Really, Diamandis? I mean, haven't you heard about the financial crisis in Europe? Haven't you heard about the shootings here? Haven't you heard about this, that, and the other thing? How can you possibly think that the world is getting better?" But ladies and gentlemen, friends, what's going on is that you and I are being used and abused by the media. You see, the news media is a drug pusher, and negative news is their drug. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on every device you have, your smartphone, your tablet, your computer, your radio, your television, newspaper, you are being pummeled over and over and over again with negative news. And there's a reason for this. You see, on those same plains of Africa, back 100, 200,000 years ago, as we were evolving, if you missed a piece of good news, well, that's too bad. You miss a piece of negative news, it could be your life. You're out of the gene pool. You won the Darwin Awards. You're dead. And for that reason, literally, the human mind evolved something called the amygdala. The amygdala is a part of the temporal lobe, about the size of your thumb. It's an ancient part of the reptilian brain. And everything that you see and hear first goes to the amygdala. And the amygdala is your danger sensor. It scans everything you see and hear looking for danger. And if you hear something, you go, "Oh my God, what was that?" And you pay immediate attention. And you see, the news media knows this. And so do our politicians. So the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, they use this. And so they'll use fear-based approaches and fear-based techniques to grab your attention. We're going to talk about crowdsourcing a little bit later. And I actually wanted to get the numbers here because I'm a scientific engineering kind of guy and I wanted to understand the actual numbers. So I went on to a platform where I could tap into thousands of people around the world to do this research for me. And I put up a small series of bounties and I said, okay, these are all the Time magazine covers between 1950 and 2010. And I want you, I'll pay 5 cents a cover for you to go and characterize those covers. Characterize the Time magazine cover, which is coming out weekly, as either a fear-based negative story cover, neutral, or positive. Do you know that in the 50s, the number of negative fear-based covers was about 5%? And by the time we reached the 1990s, it was over 50%. No wonder that we are being barraged in all of this negative news. But in fact, the world is getting much, much better by every measure you could possibly imagine. So let me give you some examples just to give you the sense of hope, because it's important for you to know these things. Number one, the human lifespan the measure of health, has more than doubled. Number two, the per capita income adjusted for inflation for every nation on this planet has more than tripled. Every single nation on earth has gotten wealthier and healthier. The cost of food has come down 13-fold, the cost of energy 20-fold, the cost of transportation 100-fold, and the cost of communications well over 1,000-fold. And my friend Steven Pinker, who is a professor at Harvard, wrote a book that literally showed that we are living during the most peaceful time ever of human existence. Your chances of dying from a violent death today is 1/500th of what it used to be. Now, I know that listening and watching the news media, you'd never imagine that true, but those are the facts and something that you should know. So, number 5 of 6. Why are we wrong about scarcity? Now, my whole mantra, my whole way of thinking is that we're not living in a world of scarcity, that we're living in a world of increasing abundance. I want to give you a very simple model. You see, those transformative changes we just spoke about, how the world is getting better and better over these last 100 years, cheaper food, energy, communications, transportation, safer, all of those things are a result of technology. Technology have driven us to have this improved world. And if you remember the charts of computational power, let me tell you, the rate at which technology is improving our lives isn't slowing down. It's getting faster. Now, the way I think about scarcity is contextual. Scarcity is changing. Now, I'll give you an example that I write about in Abundance. If I had an orange tree in my backyard and it was filled with oranges, well, at 5'5", if I went and plucked the oranges from the lowest hanging fruit of the tree, after I've plucked all of the oranges at the lowest branches, oranges have gone from being plentiful to being scarce. That is until I invented technology called a ladder. And then, in fact, my higher reach allows me to then go and grab oranges from the rest of the tree. And that model is going on over and over and over again. And in Abundance and in the additional training videos, we'll talk about how scarcity is liberating energy and water and healthcare and education and transforming our world. I'll give you one more example. We talk about energy scarcity and increasing energy demand on this planet. Do you know that on Earth, we are bathed in 5,000 times more energy than we consume as a species from the solar hitting our ground? Literally, we have 5,000 times more solar energy hitting the Earth's surface than we, the entire human race, use in a year. Now, there's great news here because the amount of solar that we're producing is increasing at 30% per year. And the cost of solar produced from solar panels, the cost of energy produced from solar panels, is dropping exponentially. Last year, the cost of solar was half the cost of diesel-generated electricity in India. And by 2020, it's going to be a third the cost in the sunny parts of the United States than the national electrical grid average. So imagine a world of literally abundant energy. That's going to drive abundant water and a whole bunch of abundance. One more example. Do you know that in India and Africa, that the poorest of the poor who are on a cell phone today have better mobile communications than President Reagan did 25 years ago? They're living in a world of communications abundance. And if that Maasai warrior in the middle of Kenya is on a smartphone on Google, they have access to more knowledge and information than President Clinton did 15 years ago. They're living in a world of information abundance. And I want to tell you that in this book and in the training videos, literally, we can show how every single aspect of your life that you thought was filled with scarcity is actually filled with abundance. The final subject in abundance thinking is how do we tap into the world's smartest people to make your dreams come true? Now, as it turns out, we all have dreams. It's just some of us choose to actually go and attack those dreams and make them happen. And there's risk in that regard. And you may say, I may not have enough money, I may not have enough knowledge, I may not have enough technology, I may not have enough resources. But let me share with you an insight. In this interconnected world in which we're living today, you have access to all of those things because you have the ability to find other people who share this dream with you. And together, you have the ability to go and make these dreams happen. So if you go back to my story, heck, I was a kid born in the Bronx, literally with the desire to fly into space. I didn't have the right stuff. I wasn't an Air Force pilot. I wasn't a test pilot. I didn't have those elements. And I knew I'd never get accepted to the astronaut corps. But what happened was I believed in my heart of hearts that that's what I wanted to do. And I went out to tap into the cognitive genius, the people around the world. Now, there are lots of approaches to tapping into the world's smartest people. And we're going to talk about that. It's, one of the ways that I used was incentive competitions. I organized with other people who wanted the same dream I had. I organized a global competition and challenged people to build private spaceships. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know where they lived. I didn't fund them. I simply put up the challenge. And we humans, we love a challenge. We're engineered. We've evolved to love challenges. We do our best work when we're challenged in sports, finding your wife, in work, whatever the case might be, or your husband. Ultimately, we love a challenge. So this original X Prize, the Ansari X Prize, challenged people to build private spaceships. And this idea of creating competitions that attract a community to help make your dreams come true, it's gold. And I'm going to share with you other competitions that people used to make their dreams come true, to solve their grand challenges. You see, today, we can tap genius, whether it's creating Wikipedia or literally creating Linux software. There are so many examples of people getting together, creating a community online to attack the problems and make their dreams come true. So the insight for exponential and abundance thinkers who have accomplished so much in their lives here is that you don't have to do everything yourself. That in this interconnected world that we live in, there are people out there who are geeks and technology experts. There are people out there who've got wealth, they've been very successful, but they want to be significant now. There are people out there who've got the arms and legs and just want to contribute. And your ability to literally tap into these people and work with them and collaborate with them changes what you can do. You see, it used to be that to touch the lives of a large number of people and do big, bold, grand dreams, you'd have to be the CEO of a large company, or you'd have to be, a centimillionaire or a billionaire. That's not the case anymore. Today, because of our massively interconnected, collaborative world, you can pull together a community and help them with a vision. You can tap into a community that exists or start a new one and get them all the different parts to work towards a common dream. That's what I did in opening up space. And that's what you can do in anything you want. It's all about finding the passion that drives you. Because that passion is what's going to attract people together to you. Few people are building a company that has all the resources anymore because literally the interconnected world allows you to tap what you need everywhere. So incentive competitions, gamification, crowdsourcing, on-demand workforce, literally co-creation of ideas. These are all terms that we'll be talking about in the future training videos about how you can tap into this cognitive genius to make your dreams come true. So hopefully these 6 ways of thinking, these 6 questions about how the top abundance and exponential thinkers think today is a useful mindset to begin our journey together. Now, I've got 2 challenges I want to ask you to work on over the next 30 days. The first challenge is a tough one, especially if you're addicted to the news. It's going to be stop watching the negative news. Stop watching the nightly news. There's an agenda, to be very clear. The news media, whether it's television or radio or papers, they want to sell you news. Now, I want to ask you this question. If you stopped watching the news, how would that affect you? One thing is you might say, I have nothing to talk about with my colleagues. Well, talk about the positive stuff. Talk about the way the world is changing in a positive fashion, because rather than just stop watching the news altogether, I want you to focus on the kind of news that you do watch. Go to Google News and actually search for terms that are important to you on family, on friendship, on learning, whatever it might be. And shape the news that you watch instead of just passively being a recipient for this barrage of negative news. And by the way, if you surround yourself with people who are constantly thinking and talking about negative news, how is that going to make you feel? You're going to be in a negative mindset all the time. You see, the way that you think, the quality of your life, is a function of the people that you go through life with. And if you're around a bunch of people who are constantly in a depressed, negative state, so will you. If they're constantly in a positive state, thinking about, how amazing the world is, how literally the technologies and the capabilities they have today are transformative, it's going to give you a positive view of the future. So my challenge to you is, again, this. Stop watching the nightly news. Stop reading the paper. If there's something so important that's going to be affecting you in your life, your friends will tell you about it. Your social network will tell you about it. If there's an asteroid coming to hit the Earth, believe me, you'll find out. But, seeing a murder in other parts of the world over and over and over again, I'll tell you, it's only going to be a negative impact on your life. Try it. Try the experiment. See how it works for you. See if you feel better about the future. I know it works amazingly for me and my friends and colleagues. How you use your time is such a precious gift. Use your time thinking in an abundance and exponential manner. Okay, that's the first challenge. With me, you're going to try this 30 days. Just try it and see how you feel. The second challenge, I want you to notice the technology that you use that improves the quality of your life that didn't exist 5 years ago, maybe 10, but definitely 5 years ago. I want you to stop and notice this, and I want you to have one conversation a week over the next month with your friends and colleagues. And just have the conversation about, hey, I walk into the airport or into an office and I expect there to be ubiquitous Wi-Fi at every coffee shop. It didn't exist 5 years ago. What did we do before that? Or, GPS on your phone. It didn't exist 5 years ago, and now, GPS ubiquitously, it's there everywhere to get you and move you around. What are the other things? Maybe it's Skype. I've got 2 little kids at home, and I Skype with their grandparents, every week. That didn't exist in the quality and service that we have today 5 years ago. What are the other things? Because you're going to start to notice that a lot of the things that improve the quality of your life are technologies coming online that allow you to live a more, freer and more, joyous life. So have those 4 conversations just once a week over the next 4 weeks. I want you to feel and notice how it feels to have a life filled with far less fear and greater anticipation and joy about the future that you're going to create. So thank you for being with me on this first video. You'll receive another video in just a couple of days. This is the first of a few that you'll be receiving. Down below on this page, I would love you to make some comments. Ask your questions. I will personally try and respond to as many as I can. I'd love to know if this is useful to you, what you think about thinking in an abundance and exponential mindset. Let's have some fun.